Picture this. You wake up 1,000 years ago, cold and alone on a windswept Scandinavian shore. No warm clothes, no shelter, no weapons. Just you, your modern brain, and a world where survival means either joining a community or becoming its next casualty. Could you survive even one day? Every day, millions of people romanticize the Viking Age through movies, TV shows, and video games. We imagine ourselves as fierce warriors, sailing the high seas, conquering new lands with axe and shield. We picture the adventurous life of Norse explorers, trading and raiding across medieval Europe with nothing but courage and cunning. But the reality of Viking Age life was far more complex and dangerous than any Hollywood production. Modern archaeology reveals that 9th century Scandinavians faced challenges that would overwhelm most modern humans within hours. The social dynamics alone could get you killed before sunset, but that was just the beginning. Recent discoveries show just how sophisticated these Norse communities had to be just to survive through a single harsh winter. The question isn't whether you're brave enough to join a raiding party or skilled enough to navigate by the stars. The question is whether your modern mindset could adapt fast enough to Viking Age realities before the medieval world claimed another victim. Let's find out what it would really take. The social minefield, where one wrong word means death. Your first challenge wouldn't be finding food or building shelter. It would be navigating the complex social hierarchy without getting yourself killed. Viking Age society was rigidly stratified, and stepping out of line could have deadly consequences. At the bottom were thralls, slaves captured in raids or born into bondage. They had no rights and could be killed by their owners without consequence. Above them were carls, free farmers and craftsmen who formed the backbone of society. At the top were jarls, nobles who controlled land, resources, and the power of life and death over those below them. But here's where your modern democratic mindset becomes a death sentence. Viking society operated on concepts of honor, reputation, and blood debt that you simply wouldn't understand. Archaeological evidence from sites like Birka shows weapons buried with people of all social classes because everyone needed to be ready to defend their honor at a moment's notice. Insult someone's family? That's grounds for a blood feud that could last generations. Show weakness or cowardice? You'll be cast out to die alone in the wilderness. Fail to reciprocate gifts or hospitality? You've just made an enemy who knows exactly where you sleep. Your modern concepts of individual rights, gender equality, and conflict resolution would be completely alien. While you're trying to apply 21st century social skills, Viking Age people would have already sized you up, determined your threat level, and decided whether you're worth keeping alive. The climate, nature's constant death threat. Medieval Scandinavia was experiencing what historians call the medieval warm period, but warm is relative. Archaeological evidence from Greenland ice cores shows that even during this relatively mild climate, Scandinavian winters could kill the unprepared in a single night. The Norse developed sophisticated clothing technology to survive these conditions. Archaeological finds from sites like Herjolfsnes in Greenland reveal complex layered garments, linen underclothes, wool tunics, leather outer garments, and fur-lined cloaks. Each piece served a specific purpose in maintaining body temperature and moisture management. But creating even basic Viking Age winter clothing requires skills you don't possess. Wool processing alone involves shearing sheep, cleaning the fleece, carding, spinning, dyeing, and weaving. Processes that took months and required specialized tools. Leatherworking demanded knowledge of which animals provided the best hides, how to tan them properly, and how to cut and sew them into garments that wouldn't fall apart in harsh conditions. Meanwhile, every day without proper clothing brings you closer to hypothermia. Viking Age people knew exactly how many layers they needed for different activities, how to dry wet clothes without damaging them, and how to repair garments in field conditions. Without this knowledge, you're essentially naked in one of Earth's most unforgiving climates, food and famine, when every meal could be. Your last archaeological analysis of Viking Age sites reveals a sophisticated food system that modern humans would struggle to navigate. Norse people practiced seasonal agriculture, managed livestock, preserved meat and fish for long-term storage, and maintained complex trade networks to supplement local production. But Viking Age nutrition was a constant balancing act between feast and famine. Climate studies show that crop failures were common, and communities that didn't prepare adequately faced starvation. Mass graves from sites like Sigtuna show evidence of famine-related deaths even in relatively prosperous areas. Your modern palate would revolt against Viking Age staples. Fermented fish, sour milk products, blood sausages, and preserved meats that modern food safety would condemn as deadly. But these weren't delicacies. They were survival foods that provided essential nutrients during long winters when fresh food was impossible to obtain. Even identifying safe food sources required generational knowledge. Which mushrooms were edible? How could you tell if preserved meat had gone bad? What plants provided nutrition versus those that could kill you? Archaeological evidence shows that Vikings traded for exotic spices and seasonings, not for flavor, but because many had medicinal properties that prevented food poisoning and nutrient deficiencies. The consequences of getting this wrong were swift and deadly. Food poisoning in an age without antibiotics often meant death. Nutritional deficiencies led to diseases that modern medicine easily prevents. Even successful hunters and farmers faced the constant threat of spoilage, theft, or raids that could leave entire communities starving. Disease and medicine. When a cut becomes a death sentence, perhaps nothing illustrates the gap between modern and Viking Age life like medieval medicine. Recent analysis of Viking Age skeletal remains reveals a population constantly battling infectious diseases, parasites, and injuries that would be minor inconveniences today. Archaeological evidence from sites like Coppergate in York shows that Vikings suffered from intestinal worms, dental diseases, bone infections, and respiratory ailments. But their medical knowledge, while sophisticated for its time, would seem primitive to modern eyes. Viking Age medicine combined herbal remedies, surgical procedures, and magical practices that were indistinguishable from religion. Sagas describe treatments that included bloodletting, trepanation, and herbal concoctions that were as likely to kill as cure. Archaeological finds include surgical tools that suggest Vikings attempted complex procedures, but without antiseptics or anesthesia, survival rates were horrific. Your modern immune system, adapted to contemporary pathogens and bolstered by childhood vaccinations, would be poorly equipped for medieval diseases. Plague, cholera, dysentery, and tuberculosis swept through Viking Age communities regularly. Even minor injuries could become fatal infections without antibiotics. Childbirth was particularly dangerous. Archaeological evidence suggests that maternal mortality rates were extremely high, and infant death was so common that many children weren't named until they survived their first year. Your modern expectations of medical care would be met with herbal tea and prayers to the gods. Warfare, where mercy is weakness and honor, is everything. The Viking Age wasn't just about raiding monasteries. It was a period of constant warfare, where survival depended on your ability to fight or your value to those who could. Archaeological evidence from mass graves and weapon deposits shows that violence was endemic throughout Scandinavian society. But Viking Age warfare wasn't the romantic sword fighting depicted in movies. Combat was brutal, close quarters, and often decided by superior numbers rather than individual skill. Weapons finds from sites like Repton show that Vikings used whatever was available: swords for the wealthy, axes and spears for farmers, and improvised weapons for everyone else. Your modern squeamishness about violence would be a fatal weakness. Viking Age people grew up expecting to fight for their lives, their families, and their honor. Children played war games that taught them to kill efficiently. Adults maintained weapons and armor as carefully as modern people maintain cars, because their lives literally depended on them. The psychological demands would be equally challenging. Viking culture celebrated warriors who died bravely in battle, while condemning those who showed cowardice. Archaeological evidence suggests that being labeled a coward could result in social exile, effectively a death sentence in harsh Scandinavian conditions. Even non-combatants lived with constant awareness of violence. Farmers fortified their homes, merchants traveled in armed groups, and craftsmen kept weapons within reach. The famous Viking peace was maintained through the threat of overwhelming retaliation against anyone who broke social codes. The harsh truth: why you'd become another casualty. The brutal reality is that most modern humans would not survive their first week in the Viking Age. Our advantages, better nutrition, education, and health, pale next to our critical weaknesses. We've traded individual survival skills for technological dependence. Vikings could navigate by stars, predict weather from cloud patterns, identify edible plants, preserve food without refrigeration, and defend themselves with improvised weapons. We can order takeout with an app and call 911 when threatened. Our social skills, adapted to democratic societies with individual rights, would be completely inappropriate for hierarchical, medieval communities, where showing proper deference could mean the difference between acceptance and exile. Even our physical conditioning works against us. Modern exercise focuses on appearance and cardiovascular health, not the functional strength needed for medieval labor. Vikings developed muscle memory for using tools, weapons, and techniques that took years to master. Your best chance would be finding a community willing to adopt a clueless outsider and hoping they'd invest the time and resources needed to teach you basic survival skills. Even then, you'd need rapid learning, constant vigilance, and extraordinary luck. Do you think you could survive in this challenging Viking era? Please share your thoughts in the comments section. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more Viking videos. Goodbye.